He built a billion-dollar empire before he turned 32. But the night his wife collapsed at their anniversary dinner, he fell to his knees, crying out, "Save my wife and son." Have you ever felt like the one who gives everything still ends up waiting? Have you ever loved someone who only realized your worth when time ran out? Tonight's story isn't about money. It's about presence, about what happens when someone wakes up too late and still fights to hold on. Would you forgive someone who made you feel invisible, right before your life changed forever? Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where real love is quiet, raw, and sometimes late. If you believe in second chances, stay with me. This one will leave you thinking about the one moment that changed it all. Now, let's begin. Des Moines never raised dreamers, not the kind who chased cameras or crowds. It raised people like Morella, quiet, grounded, and raised by hands that built and held without needing praise. Her father shaped wood, taught her how to smooth out rough edges without rushing. Her mother poured coffee for strangers at a night diner and never once complained when her shoes ached. They gave her more than money ever could. They gave her steadiness. And that's what she carried. At 26, Morella packed 2 small suitcases and left Iowa. Boston was louder, faster, and colder. But she needed space to heal people, to help them sit with pain instead of running from it. She studied trauma, not just academically, but as someone who had seen what it did to families, to voices, to trust. In time, she opened a small private practice near Cambridge. No billboard, no social media page, just a sign by the door and soft music in the waiting room. "This is your safe space," the welcome card read. And it was. Morella wasn't flashy. She wore soft sweaters, tied her hair loosely, and always made tea before each session. She didn't try to impress anyone, especially not men in tailored suits. She avoided that world, the world of big talk and louder egos, until the night she gave a 10-minute talk at a local fundraiser for survivors of domestic trauma. It wasn't a gala, no chandeliers, no flash photography, just folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and a microphone that squeaked every third sentence. But Morella stood still. She spoke slowly, carefully, each word weighted like a stone she placed in the hands of those listening. She didn't try to move the room, but something in her voice stopped him from leaving. Cassian Vale wasn't supposed to be there. His foundation had sponsored the event, but his assistant usually handled these things. He had flown in that morning from Zurich, running on 2 hours of sleep and zero tolerance for emotion. But something made him stay. She didn't speak like she was performing. She spoke like silence had been her first language. And for the first time in a long time, Cassian listened. He booked a session a week later, under a different name. Fake email. No photo on file. He walked in, tailored coat, watch tucked under his sleeve, eyes unreadable. Morella welcomed him with a soft smile. She offered him tea. He declined. He sat, said almost nothing, just gave clipped answers and scanned the bookshelf behind her head, as if it held safer truths than his own mouth. But she didn't push. She let the silence speak. By the third visit, she stopped writing notes midway through. "You don't have to outrun it," she said gently. "Not here." His jaw clenched. He said nothing. But he never missed another session. Cassian Vale had money. He had control. He had systems built to predict humanitarian crises before they exploded. But what he didn't have was stillness. Until her. She didn't chase him, didn't ask what he did, didn't flirt, didn't fawn. She just noticed. She saw the way his hand trembled slightly when he talked about childhood routines, the way his eyes darted when she asked about mornings. She wasn't trying to uncover him. She simply stayed with him while he uncovered himself. And that, more than any therapy, changed him. He didn't fall in love like a crashing wave. He fell like the sun setting quietly behind a Vermont mountain. One day, after a session, he walked her to her car. He didn't touch her, didn't say anything romantic. He simply stood there while she unlocked her door. Before stepping back, he said, "You calm everything in me," and walked away. 3 months later, he showed up at her office on a snowy morning. She had made a second cup of tea, expecting him. He didn't sit this time. Instead, he pulled something small from his coat pocket and set it on the table. A box, no speech, no ring reveal, no knees on the floor, just his voice. "Let me keep coming home to you," she cried in her office, in front of him. And that was the first time he reached for her hand. They married quietly. No press, no headlines, just a signed license, a borrowed dress, and two hearts that didn't need a crowd. He bought her a home in the hills of Vermont, remote, peaceful, filled with morning light. She kept her practice. He kept his empire. But every Friday, he came back to her. He didn't bring roses. He brought presents. They would sit by the fire. She'd read. He'd work beside her. Sometimes they wouldn't speak for hours, but her feet would rest on his lap, and his breathing would slow. They didn't try to become anything bigger than what they were. Two people who found something the world rarely gave: a safe place. He told no one at the office he'd gotten married. No press release, no announcement. Not even his assistant knew, until she noticed his ring one Monday morning. Cassian Vale was still Cassian Vale, still intense, still exact. But something shifted. He started leaving early on Fridays, stopped checking emails past 9 p.m., refused 3 high-profile interviews, and for the first time since he turned 23, he began sleeping through the night. She never asked for anything. No lavish trips, no jewelry. She didn't need his name on her door. She didn't even post a wedding photo. Her life didn't change because of the marriage. It simply became steadier. She still went to her small practice near Harvard Square, still served tea, still lit the same calming candles. But some clients noticed she smiled more. One even said, "You look held." Morella had to blink back a tear. Their first year was still, not perfect, not dramatic, just real. They shared silence better than they shared words. On Sundays, he brought in groceries and helped fold laundry. When he forgot to pick up eggs once, he drove back 20 minutes after midnight. Not because she asked, but because he didn't want to miss a promise, even a quiet one. When they argued, it never lasted long. He'd go for a walk. She'd sit on the porch with a book. Eventually, one of them would say, "I'm here." That was enough. He watched her differently than he watched anyone. Cassian had trained himself to scan people fast, what they wanted, what they feared, what they hid. But with her, he paused. He watched the way she cut vegetables, the way she tucked her feet under the blanket, the way her hair curled after she showered. She was ordinary, but every detail of her calmed him. Morella watched him too, not the way the world did. Not as the man who rebuilt global crisis response systems, but as the man who sometimes held his breath when she touched his back. As the man who never learned to cry as a boy. She didn't try to fix him. She just stayed when he unraveled. They didn't travel much, but they did drive. Long road trips with no music, just the sound of wind through the open window. He'd drive. She'd read out loud. They rarely finished books. But they finished drives with a kind of quiet safety that most couples never learned to build. After 2 years, people started whispering. His board of directors wondered why he didn't bring his wife to events. His mother, who had spent her life attending galas, questioned why Morella didn't wear designer gowns or host charity brunches. But Cassian never answered questions he didn't care about. "She doesn't like cameras," he once told a reporter. Then he added, "That's why I love her." Year 3 was different. That's when the pressure mounted. Cassian's company, Vale Tech Global, secured a global contract for early disaster prediction systems. It was a massive win, but it came with sharp teeth. His calendar stopped having white space. His phone buzzed during meals. He started flying out on Thursdays instead of Fridays. And Morella adjusted. She didn't guilt trip him. Didn't fight his travel. She packed his socks, left notes in his luggage. Still, the shift was felt. One weekend, he didn't come home. No explanation, just a message. Emergency meeting. We'll explain later. He didn't. And she didn't press. But that Sunday night, she sat alone on their porch with a blanket, listening to the wind and feeling the distance. When he came home Monday morning, he looked exhausted. He hugged her, said nothing. She nodded, let him be. But later that night, when she touched his arm gently, he turned away. That was the first night they didn't fall asleep touching. She stared at the ceiling for hours. He faced the wall. She wasn't angry. She was afraid, not of losing him, but of watching him drift back into the man who never stayed still long enough to be held. She tried again. Little things. His favorite cookies in the kitchen, a handwritten letter in his laptop bag, a playlist on their speaker that reminded him of road trips. No response. Not rejection, just silence. And that was harder. Still, she didn't walk. Because love wasn't absence of struggle. It was presence through it. She reminded herself of that every time she set the table for two, even when he texted last minute, won't make it tonight. She still made dinner, still lit one candle, still folded his napkin. One night, she found herself whispering aloud in the kitchen, "Come back to me." There was no one there to hear it, but she said it anyway. And he did come back, eventually, but not in the way she expected. Cassian Vale was raised to be powerful, not peaceful. His mother didn't soothe. She scheduled. His father didn't listen. He commanded. Emotion was weakness. Stillness was lazy. Love? That was for poets, not empire builders. From the time he was 6, Cassian understood one thing. You earned your place, or you were forgotten. So he earned it. Every year, every deal, every hour. He didn't rest. He didn't ask for softness. He dominated. By 31, his face had been on the cover of business journals more times than he could count. His company, Vale Tech Global, was praised as the future of humanitarian intelligence. He could predict floods before cities even smelled rain. But he couldn't predict what his silence was doing to his wife. When he met Morella, he wasn't looking for peace. He didn't even know he needed it. He'd only stayed at the fundraiser because he owed a favor to the organizer. He'd planned to sneak out after 5 minutes. Then she started speaking. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was low, measured. She didn't try to inspire. She didn't dramatize trauma. She spoke like she had held people through their worst pain and still believed in gentleness. And that disarmed him more than any argument ever had. He booked the first session because he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not in a romantic way. In a what is that silence inside her and why does it make me want to sit still kind of way. The office smelled like lavender. She offered tea. He didn't take it. But he sat. That alone was a miracle. The first session, he said 12 words total. The second, 17. By the third, she said, "You're not here to talk, are you?" He said nothing. She nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to speak to be seen." His throat tightened. No one had ever told him that before. He found himself waiting for Fridays. Not just because of the flights home, but because of her. She didn't challenge him like rivals. She didn't shrink from him like strangers. She simply stayed present. He was so used to being needed for what he could fix. Morella didn't want him to fix anything. She just wanted him to show up. And he did, every week, every session, every moment he could. The walls started to lower, not crash, just settle. One night, 6 months into their marriage, Cassian had a nightmare. He never had them, at least not since childhood. But this time, he woke up in sweat, breathing hard. Morella stirred. She didn't ask what it was. She simply reached for his hand, held it against her chest and whispered, "You're not alone." He fell asleep within minutes. Safe, for the first time in decades. But love, real love, doesn't erase pain. It simply gives it a place to land. Year 3 tested that love. The media leak hit like a missile. An anonymous tip had exposed confidential internal audits at Vale Tech Global. Though legally cleared, the damage to Cassian's reputation was brutal. Clients hesitated. Investors whispered. He was forced to restructure teams, fire long-time staff, and defend ethics he never thought he'd have to explain. Sleep disappeared. His tone shifted. The warmth in his Friday returns grew thin. He hated himself for it, but he couldn't stop, because stopping meant feeling, and he didn't know how to do that, unless she was holding him, but he didn't want her to see him weak, so he distanced instead. He stayed late at the Boston office, started sleeping in the guest room when working late. He told himself it was practical, efficient, but it was avoidance. Morella knew. She watched the man who once reached for her hand in silence, now reach for his phone, and instead, she didn't cry. She didn't confront. She simply wrote him a letter. You don't have to carry it alone. I didn't fall in love with the CEO. I fell in love with the man who brought quiet back into the room. Come back to me when you're ready. I'll be here. She slid it into his briefcase without a word. He found it during a flight to San Francisco. He didn't read it right away. He waited until the plane was grounded in silence, lights dimmed, everyone asleep. Then, in a pool of blue overhead light, he read every word. By the end, his fingers were shaking. He tucked the letter into his inner coat pocket, near his heart, where it stayed for months, but he didn't reply, didn't bring it up, not because he didn't feel it, but because he did, and that terrified him. Cassian Vale could lead world relief teams into war zones, but he didn't know how to walk into his own bedroom and say, "I'm not okay." So he said nothing. He missed their Tuesday lunch date. He forgot to call after her doctor appointment. She'd had a small fainting episode, nothing serious, but still. He hadn't called, and when she told him that night, his only response was, "I'll try to do better." She believed him. But she also saw something in his eyes, the old walls, returning. One morning, while folding laundry, she paused over one of his t-shirts, pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered again, "Come back to me." And once again, he did, but not with words. Not yet. First came the moment he noticed her across the room, humming while organizing baby clothes. His hand paused on the keyboard. His heart did something strange. It clenched, then softened, but he still said nothing. He simply stayed, because sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's a billionaire sitting in silence, trying to find the words. Before it's too late, their relationship never followed a script. There were no grand declarations, no diamond chandeliers, no hired orchestras in hotel lobbies. There was only her. And for Cassian Vale, that was the first thing in years that felt real. He proposed without a ring, no cameras, no reservations, no rehearsed words. It was a cold morning. They sat across from each other in her office after a session. He didn't speak for 5 minutes, just stared down at the tea she'd made for him. Then he reached into his coat and placed a small box on the table. Not velvet, not gold-lined, just simple, grey and square. Inside was a silver band, thin, unpolished, no stone. "I don't know how to do this part," he said, voice low, "but you calm everything in me, and I want to keep coming home to you." That was it. No question, no speech. Just a man who never smiled, offering the one thing he had never given anyone else, his stillness. She cried in front of him, not because she needed marriage, but because he finally stopped running. And that was the only yes she needed. They married 2 weeks later, privately, quietly, in a small garden behind her clinic. The officiant was a friend from her trauma group. The dress was borrowed. The vows were whispered. Cassian didn't invite anyone. Neither did she. They didn't post a photo. They didn't change status updates. They didn't even tell many people right away. They protected what they built. Because loud things break easy. He bought them a home tucked in the hills of Vermont. Morella picked it for its windows. Cassian approved it for the silence. It became their haven. She still worked. He still traveled. But they had a rule. Fridays, no matter where he was, he flew home on Friday. No meetings, no delays, even if it was for just one night. Even if he had to leave again before sunrise Saturday, he showed up. Every time. Their first year of marriage was soft, still, built on routine and unspoken tenderness. He never raised his voice. She never demanded things. They moved around each other like people who respected silence as much as sound. He once told her, "I don't need noise anymore." And she replied, "That's what healing feels like." He worked in a world full of decisions. People brought him emergencies, fires, deadlines. But with her, everything slowed. Evenings in Vermont meant her head on his chest while she read, his hand on her knee under the throw blanket, the sound of logs cracking in the fireplace. Sometimes they'd sit without saying anything for hours, not bored, not tense, just present. When she laughed, he stopped everything. Not because it was loud, but because it was rare and real. The kind of laugh that made him want to memorize the shape of her lips. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes he did. She danced to old jazz in the kitchen. He stood behind her, hands on her waist, pretending not to be swaying too. She said he needed rhythm. He said she was the rhythm. She rolled her eyes, but he saw her blush. The world never saw that side of him. To everyone else, he was stone, sharp, clean, precise. But in that kitchen, he was just hers. She never tried to change him, never tried to make him softer. Instead, she gave him space to be vulnerable. And in that space, he found parts of himself he had buried long ago. He once told her, "I spent my whole life trying to become a man who wouldn't be abandoned." She looked at him, eyes gentle. "Then let yourself be loved by someone who won't." He didn't cry, but something in him unclenched and never returned to how it was. Their second year brought rhythm. Her practice grew. His company reached new contracts. They took short drives on weekends, watched documentaries, adopted a dog named Nell who refused to listen to Cassian, no matter how commanding his tone. Morella loved it. "You found your match," she teased. Cassian glared. The dog yawned. They made a habit of writing each other notes. Nothing dramatic, just slips of paper. "Tea's hot. Missed your face today. Your quiet saved me again." He kept hers in his desk drawer. She taped his on the fridge. But year 3 shifted. It started small. A late-night call, a delayed return, a forgotten lunch date. Then came the leak. The headlines, the questions. He didn't handle it well. He started staying later at the office, stopped calling as much. His emails got colder, his hugs shorter, but he always came back on Fridays, even when he didn't speak, even when she waited with 2 plates and 1 untouched candle. One night, he stood in the doorway, watching her wash dishes. She didn't look up. He wanted to speak, to say, "I'm sorry I've been gone even when I'm here." But the words jammed in his throat, so instead, he stepped behind her, placed his hand gently on her back, and stayed there. That was his way of saying sorry, and she accepted it, because she knew. The man who never smiled stayed. If you've ever loved someone through their silence, if you've ever held on while they drifted, drop a comment below. Let others know they're not alone in choosing quiet love. And if this chapter moved you, like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Charles' Stories, where healing doesn't always shout, but it always shows up. Cassian Veil was used to pressure. He'd spent his entire adult life performing under it. Investor deadlines, global crisis briefings, sudden floods, war zones, and media scrutiny. He handled all of it with the same steady stare and clipped tone. But what came in their 3rd year of marriage wasn't like any of that. Because it wasn't professional, it was personal. The leak hit quietly at first. A minor journalist posted screenshots of internal emails from Veil Tech. They weren't illegal, but they raised questions. Budget irregularities, a delay in releasing predictive alerts in 2 African regions. A consultant flagged for misconduct and left unchecked for 3 months. None of it was Cassian's direct doing, but he was the CEO, which meant every flame led back to his name. He fired 3 people, rebuilt his leadership team, flew to Switzerland twice in 10 days to reassure his international partners. The company stabilized, but he didn't. His phone never stopped vibrating. His face stayed clenched. His voice got sharper, even when he wasn't angry. He didn't lash out at Morella, but she could feel the weight settling into his shoulders. It showed in how he kissed her. Fast, distracted, mechanical, and in how often those kisses stopped happening. He still came home on Fridays, but sometimes it wasn't until 3 a.m. Once, she heard the car engine cut off in the driveway, but he never came inside. She found him asleep in the back seat, his phone still lit up on his lap. She didn't wake him. She just placed a folded blanket over his chest, closed the door softly, and walked back inside. He never mentioned it the next morning, but he held her hand longer during breakfast, didn't let go even when she reached for the butter knife. Morella knew something had shifted. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was disconnection. He became efficient at pretending, smile for the quarterly reports, firm handshake at the conferences, smooth statement for the media. But at home, he started to vanish. One evening, she made roasted chicken and lemon rice, his favorite. Candles on, soft music, their usual table. He walked in, hung his coat, and kissed her forehead with a muttered, "Smells good." Then he disappeared into his study. Dinner got cold. He didn't come out. She didn't cry. She wrapped the plates and put everything in the fridge. But the silence that night felt heavier than all the chaos he was battling. Morella wrote another note the next morning. "You are not your job. You are not your reputation. You are mine. Come home. M." She tucked it under his watch on the nightstand. He never said anything, but she noticed he wore that watch every day for the next 2 weeks. Still, the changes didn't stop. He started sleeping in the guest room when he had early flights. She understood, at first, but after the 4th time in 1 month, she stopped saying goodnight. He missed her clinic's anniversary celebration. She'd prepared small speech cards and invited a few clients and peers. He said he'd be there, but he wasn't. He sent flowers instead. The card read, "Proud of you." See, she kept the card. But it didn't feel like presents. It felt like permission. And Morella didn't want permission. She wanted him. That same weekend, he returned home after midnight. She had fallen asleep on the couch with a book on her chest. He stood over her quietly, watching her breathe. Something in him cracked. He gently moved the book, covered her with a throw, and sat beside her on the floor back against the couch. His head leaned against her leg. He stayed like that until the sun came up. They never spoke about that night, but something softened again the next morning. He brought her tea, kissed her neck, and whispered, "Thanks for waiting." She smiled, but it was tired, because love is not made of only moments. It's made of consistency, and his was starting to fracture. She tried to make space, let him feel safe, let him unravel without pressure. But she also began to wonder, was he withdrawing or was he leaving? One Friday, he was 2 hours late. She didn't set the table this time, didn't light candles, didn't play music. She sat on the front porch, holding a cup of chamomile tea, blanket over her knees. When he pulled into the driveway, she didn't move. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, and saw her. She didn't look angry. She looked still. That scared him more than any headline ever had. He sat beside her. They didn't speak for several minutes. Then she said, "Are you still here?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, it was soft. "I'm trying." She nodded, took a slow sip. "Try slower." He turned his head, looked at her like it was the first time in weeks he'd seen her clearly. She placed her hand on his. "I'm not asking for perfection, just presence." That night, he didn't open his laptop, didn't read reports, didn't reply to any emails. He lay beside her, held her waist, and stayed awake long after she fell asleep, because he was afraid if he blinked, she might disappear. 2 weeks passed. The silence in their home didn't roar. It crept. It pressed against the walls like fog, thick, slow, and impossible to escape. Morella still left post-it notes with reminders to drink water, still folded his favorite shirts with lavender oil tucked inside, still reached for his hand when they passed in the hallway. But Cassian's eyes stayed distant. He wasn't unkind. He wasn't cruel. He was simply absent. Morella wasn't used to begging for attention. She was used to presence, to stillness, to a kind of love that sat beside you, even in silence. But this silence felt empty. It didn't hold space. It removed it. She thought about confronting him, demanding time, demanding answers. But she knew Cassian. He didn't respond to pressure. He responded to stillness, to subtlety, to things that reminded him he was safe. So she waited. But her heart was tiring. Then the nausea started. Just once at first. She thought it was stress. But then it came again, and again. She tracked the dates, missed her cycle, bought a test, stared at the result for over 5 minutes without breathing. Positive. She sat in the bathroom, knees drawn to her chest, forehead against the cabinet door. For the first time in their marriage, she didn't know how to feel. She waited 2 weeks before telling him, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't predict how he'd react. The Cassian she fell in love with would have held her immediately, would have sat down in silence, pressed his forehead to hers, and said nothing but everything with his eyes. But this version, this Cassian felt miles away, even when his hand brushed hers across the couch. It was a quiet Sunday. The rain had paused. The fireplace was lit. He was at the table, scanning quarterly reports. She stood in the doorway for a full minute before speaking. "I'm pregnant," she said. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible. He didn't look up right away. His eyes stayed on the screen, then slowly lifted. His face didn't change. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded, biting her lip so she wouldn't break. He stared for a second more, then stood, walked outside, didn't say a word. She didn't follow. 5 minutes, then 10. She poured herself tea, didn't drink it, just sat on the edge of the couch, trying to feel her own body. Her hands rested on her stomach. It felt foreign, heavy, full of life and uncertainty. Finally, the door opened. He walked in. His steps were slower, controlled. He didn't sit. He knelt beside her, took her hand, pressed his forehead to it. "We'll do this," he said quietly. "I'll try harder." That was it. No smile, no kiss, no visible joy. But it was honest. And for Morella, honesty mattered more than performance. Still, something inside her curled inward, because she hadn't told him to be perfect. She'd wanted him to be present, and he wasn't. The next few weeks moved in cautious rhythm. She scheduled her first prenatal appointment. He didn't come. A meeting ran late. She sent him a photo of the sonogram. He replied, "Looks strong. Good sign." That was all. "No, I can't believe it. No, we made this." Just a text. Like a client update. She didn't cry. Not that day. But that night, she showered longer. Let the water cover her face, so she wouldn't have to hear the quiet disappointment in her own breathing. Still, she made space for him, invited him to feel involved. She bought baby books and left one by his side of the bed. He didn't touch it. She played lullaby music during breakfast. He didn't comment. She left a sticky note on the fridge. "Guess what fruit size our baby is this week?" He never answered. The ache wasn't from his coldness. Cassian was never cold. He was afraid of becoming the father he grew up with, afraid of losing what little control he still had over his life. But fear makes people selfish. And now, he was beginning to feel like a stranger in the very home he built to feel safe. One night, she found him in his study. Laptop open, tie loosened. She stood in the doorway. "You still haven't said anything real," she said. He looked up. "What do you want me to say?" "That you're scared." That you're happy, that you want to be here, that you still see me." His jaw tightened. "I never stopped seeing you." She shook her head. "No. You stopped showing up. And now you're trying to fix this with silence." He stood, walked toward her. She didn't move. He placed his hand over hers. "I don't know how to be this version of me." "You don't have to," she whispered. "You just have to try. With me." That night, he lay beside her, didn't speak, but his hand never left her stomach. It wasn't joy, it wasn't repair, but it was a start. Still, the cracks hadn't stopped forming. They were just quieter now. And Morella, strong, calm, patient Morella, was beginning to break. She counted down the weeks on sticky notes stuck to the fridge. Week 28. Week 29. Week 30. Every Monday morning, Morella peeled off the old square and replaced it with the next. She tried to make it something light, something Cassian could engage with, even when his mind was elsewhere. He noticed. Sometimes he smiled, but he rarely said anything. Her pregnancy was progressing steadily. No complications, no red flags. But the emotional weight grew heavier with each silent week. She cooked more now, not because he asked, but because it kept her hands busy. She was always better at holding things than waiting for them. Cassian worked late almost every night, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how else to handle what was coming. Fatherhood terrified him. He didn't have a blueprint, only the bruises left by a father who measured everything in performance and nothing in love. He wanted to do it right, so he buried himself in productivity, but Morella didn't need a provider. She needed her husband. One night, she lit a single candle at the dinner table, left his plate covered, waited until 10:30. He never came home. When he walked in after midnight, she didn't say a word. She had already gone to bed, left the candle burning. He saw it, sat down at the table, and ate quietly, alone. She woke to an empty bed. Again. At her 34-week checkup, the doctor smiled. "Everything looks great. Strong heartbeat, clear growth. You're doing everything right." Morella nodded, smiled softly, held back the urge to ask, "But what about the things I can't measure?" Cassian didn't come with her. He had a virtual board meeting. She didn't remind him this time. Back home, she sat by the fireplace and pulled out her anniversary folder. 5 years. She had planned something quiet, soft, simple, not a party, not a trip, just a home-cooked dinner, candlelight. His favorite dish, rosemary chicken and mashed sweet potatoes, and a folded letter tucked inside his napkin. It read, "We started with silence, and even now I believe in the quiet, because I never needed you to be loud. I just needed you to be here." She prepped everything herself, took her time setting the table, wore the soft burgundy dress he once said made her look like still water. She lit the candles, warmed the food, checked the clock. 6:45 p.m. He wasn't home. 7:20. She poured water into his glass. 8:05. She sat down at the table. 9:13. Headlights pulled into the driveway. The door opened. He walked in, tie undone, jaw tight. Something came up. I had to handle it. She stood slowly, still calm. I made dinner. He looked at the table. Then, at her. I need to check something for work. He stepped into his study, closed the door. She sat back down, looked at the folded letter in his napkin. She didn't cry. She reached for his glass. But before her fingers could wrap around it, a sharp pain gripped her side. Her breath hitched. Her hand flew to her belly. Then came another, stronger, deeper. She gasped, gripped the edge of the table. "Cassian." Her voice barely reached the door. She took a step forward, then another. The floor tilted. Her legs gave out. The glass fell, shattered. She collapsed beside it. The door opened fast. He stepped out, saw her, eyes wide, face white. "Morella." He dropped to his knees beside her. Her hands clutched her belly. "Pain. It hurts. I can't. He shouted for the driver, screamed into his phone. Call the hospital, now. I need paramedics at my house, now. His voice cracked. His hands trembled. Morella, stay with me. Look at me. Look at me. She blinked slowly, lips trembling, trying to speak. Then another wave hit. She let out a soft cry. He held her head. No, no, no. Stay. Please, just stay. Blood. On the floor. On his hands. His breath caught. The driver burst in. She's not responding. Cassian pressed his forehead to hers, whispered, I'm sorry. I should have sat with you. I should have come home. Her eyes rolled back. Her body shook. The sound of sirens grew closer. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, Cassian ran alongside, clutched her hand, held it like his life was inside it, and as they wheeled her out, he cried out, Save my wife and son. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and adrenaline. Cassian sat on a cold plastic chair, elbows on his knees, hands stained with her blood. He didn't speak, didn't move, didn't check his phone. For the first time in over a decade, he didn't need control. He needed a miracle. The doctor had said 6 words when she was rushed in. We'll do everything we can, sir. Then they disappeared behind the sliding doors. Cassian wasn't used to waiting. He was used to results. Updates. Power. But there was no CEO title here. No investor leverage. No special entrance. Just a man, sitting in yesterday's shirt, knees bouncing, whispering the same 6 words on loop in his head. Save my wife and son. Time didn't move. His driver offered water. He didn't take it. A nurse tried asking questions. He answered, but didn't register them. His hand never stopped shaking. His tie hung from his pocket like a lifeline. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, elbows red from rubbing together. For once, his image meant nothing. He closed his eyes, saw the kitchen table, the folded napkin. He never read the letter. That gutted him more than the silence. She'd planned it all, and he missed it. Not because of traffic, not because of a real emergency, because of pride, because of habit, because he kept choosing noise over her. He buried his face in his hands, breathed hard, but the tears still came, not loud, not dramatic. Just slow, silent, real. Cassian Vale hadn't cried in 21 years. Not at funerals, not at failures, not even when his father called him worthless at 16. But tonight, he broke, because he finally saw her, and she wasn't there to see it. A nurse came over, gentle tone, clipboard in hand. Sir, are you the father? His throat tightened. He nodded. Your son is in NICU, stable but small. He's strong. Cassian blinked, inhaled, choked on the air. Your wife? The nurse paused. She's in recovery. We stopped the bleeding, but she lost a lot. It was close. He gripped the armrest, so tight his knuckles turned white. But she's alive. She's alive. His breath released. His head fell forward, and for the first time that night, he let go of the air he didn't know he'd been holding. They let him scrub in to see the baby. He followed slowly, hands clean, shoes covered. He stood before the warmer, looked down. Tiny, wires, machines, but alive. He didn't speak. He reached out, placed 2 fingers inside the warmer, and the baby, his son, curled a fist around one of them. Cassian didn't cry again, but his jaw clenched so hard it ached. He whispered, You made it. You both made it. He stood there for 15 minutes, didn't move, didn't check his watch. Then he asked to see her. They walked him down the corridor. Morella was pale, still, breathing shallow but steady. A single 4-line dripped beside her. The monitor beeped quietly. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, didn't say anything. He just walked to her side, sat, held her hand, pressed it to his lips. Her eyelids fluttered. She stirred. He stood fast. Hey, I'm here. Her voice was barely there. Did they... He's here, Cassian whispered. Our son. He's in NICU. He's strong. Just like you. She blinked up at him. Slow, tired, but present. Did you read it? He paused. What? She gave a weak smile. The letter. His chest cracked. His head dropped. I didn't. She nodded, closed her eyes. It's okay. No, he said, breath catching. It's not. I've been so far away, and you were always right here. He kissed her hand, then her forehead. I'm sorry. She opened her eyes again. Are you here now? His grip tightened. I'm not leaving. Not again. She exhaled, closed her eyes once more, and slept. He stayed all night. Didn't move, didn't look at charts, didn't call anyone. He fed her ice chips, wiped her lips gently, watched her breathe. When the monitor beeped faster once, he stood and held her hand until it steadied. At 4:26 a.m., a nurse stepped in. You can rest, Mr. Vale. We'll take it from here. He shook his head. I'm not moving. She left without pressing. Some people fight with action. Some fight with words. Cassian was finally learning to fight with presence. He read the letter that morning. She had left a second copy on his nightstand in case he never opened the napkin. He didn't deserve it, but he read every word. You were always enough. You never had to prove anything. You just had to stay. He folded it, pressed it to his chest, and for the first time since founding his company, he called his board and told them he wasn't available for the next 6 weeks. No debates, no questions. Just this. My family almost died. I won't make them wonder where I stand again. Cassian didn't go back to work, not that week, not the next. He stayed. For the first time since launching his company, he set his phone on silent and left it that way. No meetings, no press statements, no investors, just hospital halls, slow walks to the NICU, and whispered promises at his wife's bedside. Morella was healing. Slowly. Her body had been through a war. Her blood pressure remained unpredictable. Her sleep came in patches, not stretches. But she held her son every chance she got. And when she did, Cassian stayed close, one hand on her shoulder, one on the tiny blanket wrapped around their boy. They named him Leor, a name Morella had once scribbled on a post-it note, tucked inside a baby name book she thought he never touched. He just never said anything. But now, he did. I saw what you wrote months ago, he whispered, while rocking Leor's bassinet. She smiled faintly. You remembered? He looked at her with the softest eyes she'd seen in months. I remember everything about you. Cassian had changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but with intention. He brought tea without her asking, brushed her hair back during feedings, rubbed her feet when the swelling hadn't gone down by week 2. He read about postpartum recovery, asked questions, didn't treat her as fragile, just deserving of care. One evening she asked, Are you doing this because you feel guilty? He didn't flinch. No. She raised an eyebrow. Then why? His voice dropped. Because I should have done it all along. By week 3, she was discharged. They returned to the Vermont home, this time as 3. The nursery hadn't been finished. She hadn't gotten to it in time. So Cassian finished it, built the crib himself, painted the ceiling sky blue, installed a baby monitor, and then sat staring at it like it was a second heartbeat. Morella noticed, not just what he did, but how present he became. He still didn't speak much. But when he did, it was with weight, and when he didn't, he stayed anyway. On their first Friday home, Morella lit a candle again. She didn't tell him, just placed it in the center of the dinner table and waited. He came in from the porch holding Leor, paused, saw the table, the warmth, the space she had made, and this time, he sat. She poured water into both glasses. They ate slowly. He held Leor in one arm while using the other to slice vegetables on her plate. No work calls, No updates, no glances at his phone, just the three of them, breathing, healing, beginning. Later that night, they stood by the crib together. Morella ran her hand along the edge of the wood. "You built this," she whispered. Cassian nodded. "I needed to touch something that keeps him safe." She turned toward him. "He won't remember this," she said gently. "I will," he replied. Then he added, "Every Friday I was building an empire, but I left the only thing worth coming home to." She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her head rested on his chest, and for the first time since the collapse, they stood as one again. He didn't promise perfection, didn't try to repair the past with flowers or trips or speeches. He simply stayed, because this time he understood. Presence doesn't raise its voice. It reaches out a hand and doesn't let go. The quiet moments didn't scare him anymore, not like they used to. Cassian had spent years filling his life with urgency. Loud meetings, breaking news, always on, always ahead. But fatherhood slowed everything. The cry of a newborn at 3 a.m., the weight of a 7-pound body curled into his chest, the sound of Morella humming while washing bottles. It all became louder than stock alerts ever did. Still, the outside world didn't wait. After 5 weeks of silence, Vale Tech pressed in. A scandal in one of their partner offices overseas. An urgent board meeting scheduled without his consent. A client threatening to pull a major contract unless he showed face. His name was back in headlines. Some praised him for stepping back after the birth. Others accused him of weakness, distraction. He read every headline, then turned off the screen. Morella noticed. He was trying to be both, CEO and father. But something always had to give. And this time, he didn't want it to be them. One night, while Lior slept between them in a bassinet, she asked, "When do you go back?" He looked up from the bottle he was warming. "Next Monday." For 2 days, she didn't protest. She didn't flinch, but her silence spoke. "You're worried," he said. "I'm scared," she whispered, "that the version of you who left might come back." He stepped forward, took her face in his hands. "I'm not going to disappear again." She nodded slowly. "You said that once before." He didn't argue. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, and said, "Then I'll prove it differently this time." He flew out Monday morning, boarded the jet, suit on, tie straight, but something felt different. He kept looking at his phone. At the photo of Morella holding Leah on the porch, her hair tied back, his tiny hand curled around her thumb. He stared at it the whole flight. At the boardroom table, his tone was firm, but not hard. "I'm not here to explain my choices," he told them. "I'm here to restructure how this company moves without depending on my burnout." Some respected it, some resented it. He didn't care, because for the first time, his empire wasn't his identity. He returned 24 hours later instead of 48. Morella opened the door barefoot, robe on, sleep in her eyes. He stepped in, dropped his bag, and held her. "I made it home for bath time," he said. She didn't cry. She just leaned into him and whispered, "You made it back to us." That Friday, he didn't need a reminder. He was home before sunset, held Lior while Morella napped, prepared her tea the way she liked it, chamomile, no sugar, lemon slice on the rim. And after they'd eaten, when the house was still and the fire had dimmed, he took her hand, sat beside her, and finally opened the original anniversary letter she'd left weeks ago. He read it out loud, every line. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "We started with silence, and even now, I believe in the quiet. Because I never needed you to be loud. I just needed you to be here." He folded the letter, placed it on the table, then whispered, "I'm here. And I'm staying." Morella didn't answer right away. She turned, took his hand, rested it over her heart, and said, "Then let's build again. No contracts, no headlines, just a promise. To stay, to show up, to make every Friday count." 3 months passed. Lior's cries had changed. He no longer sounded like a whisper. He had weight in his lungs, rhythm in his feeding. Cassian knew every sound, the grunt before a diaper change, the soft sigh that meant he was drifting to sleep, the sharp squeal that signaled, "Pick me up now." He memorized them all. He still worked, some days, mostly from home. He set hard boundaries now. Fridays were non-negotiable, Sundays were family only, and every morning he was the one who made Morella tea before she rolled out of bed. They built a new rhythm. Lior in the wrap across her chest, Cassian with his laptop at the breakfast bar, quiet jazz playing low in the background. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours, not because they were avoiding, but because they didn't need to. The silence now had presence. One Thursday afternoon, Cassian got a call. The chairman of Vailtech's parent investment group wanted him in New York. The next morning, face to face, the man said, about the Southeast Asia contract. They're re-evaluating funding. Cassian's silence made the man nervous. "You'll be here, right?" Cassian looked toward the nursery. Lior was giggling in Morella's arms. Sunlight hit her face just right, lighting up her cheekbones, catching the tired glow under her eyes. He turned back to the phone. "I'll think about it." That night, Morella sat on the floor with a baby blanket across her lap. Cassian kneeled beside her, folding onesies. She glanced up, casually. "They called, didn't they?" He nodded once. "They want me in New York tomorrow." She didn't blink. "Are you going?" He looked down at the onesie in his hands. "I don't know." She waited. Cassian finally met her gaze. "I know what's on the table. I know what's at stake. But I also know what I almost lost." She reached over, touched his wrist. "You don't have to prove anything, but you do have to choose." That night, after she fell asleep with Lior on her chest, Cassian walked out onto the porch, stared at the dark sky, called his assistant. "Book the flight," he said, "but make it a day trip. I'm not staying overnight." He paused. "And I want to be home before bedtime." "Understood?" He flew out before sunrise. Boardroom full by 9 a.m. Papers passed across the table. Figures, contracts, pressure. He spoke clearly, firmly, then closed the folder and stood. "I won't miss another moment that matters. You want me? You'll work around my hours." A silence filled the room. No one pushed back. Because when Cassian Vale drew a line, the world adjusted. He left the building by 2 p.m., back in Vermont by 6:20, home by 6:48. He walked in, found Morella asleep on the couch, Lior curled on her chest, the soft hum of a lullaby playing in the background. The floor creaked as he stepped closer. She stirred, eyes opened. "You came home," she whispered. He set his briefcase down, sat beside her. "Of course I did." He took Lior gently from her arms, held his son close, looked down at him like the entire world was in that 6-pound frame. The room went still. The floor, the walls, the air. Everything stopped. But in the silence, Cassian heard everything. He heard the family he almost lost, the love that never gave up on him, the second chance he almost missed. He kissed Lior's forehead, then Morella's, and whispered, "This is the only empire I'm building now. If you've ever had to choose between what the world demands and who you love, if you've ever learned that presence speaks louder than promises, leave a comment, because sometimes the most powerful moment isn't when they rise. It's when they return. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, where love, quiet strength, and redemption always find their voice. Morning light spilled into the nursery. Lior was cooing in his sleep, tiny hands twitching like he was dreaming of something soft. Morella stood by the crib, robe tied loosely, hair pulled back. Cassian stepped behind her, rested his chin on her shoulder, and whispered, "He sounds like you when you hum." She smiled, eyes still fixed on their son. "He breathes like you do when you're finally at peace." They didn't rush through mornings anymore. They took their time. Cassian brewed her tea. She warmed the baby's clothes in the dryer so he wouldn't flinch when touched. They fed him together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with small jokes that only they understood. The pace was slower now, but every second felt earned. On the couch, Morella curled beside him, Lior stretched across both their laps. Cassian traced small circles on the baby's back. "I never thanked you," he said. "For what?" "For staying." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand, laced their fingers. "I didn't stay out of strength," she said. "I stayed because I saw who you were. Before you did." He turned toward her, voice low. "Do you forgive me?" She met his eyes, held the gaze. "I already did. That night, when you cried for us." Cassian swallowed hard. "I thought I lost you." "You did. For a while," she said gently. "But you came back." He nodded slowly. "You both stayed." Later that afternoon, they bundled Lior in his soft blue blanket and stepped out onto the porch. The Vermont air was crisp. Leaves were beginning to fall. The season shifting, just like them. Cassian rocked Lior in his arms, while Morella sipped tea beside him. "You ever think about how different life would have been if you hadn't come to that fundraiser?" He looked out at the trees, all the time. "I think about how I almost left before you spoke. I think about how I was never supposed to sit still." She chuckled. "And now you're a man who knows how to burp a baby without blinking." He smirked. "And somehow still runs a billion-dollar company." She leaned on his shoulder. "But now, you're doing both without disappearing." That night, Cassian stood in the nursery. Lior's tiny fingers curled around his pinky. He whispered, "I'll never leave the room again." His phone buzzed twice. He didn't check it. Instead, he reached for Morella's letter, still folded neatly in his pocket. He kept it with him now, everywhere. He opened it. "Read it again." In silence. "You were always enough. You never had to prove anything. You just had to stay." He placed the letter back against his chest, then kissed his sleeping son's forehead. Because now he understood. Staying wasn't weakness. Staying was the strongest thing he'd ever done. That Sunday morning, Cassian did something he hadn't done in years. He sat with a notebook and wrote, not for business, not to plan, not to pitch. He wrote to Morella, not a speech, not an apology, just words. His words. She found the note tucked beside her mug the next morning. It wasn't long, but it stopped her mid-sip. "I spent so long building what the world needed. I forgot the one person who never needed me to be anything but here. I'm not sorry for being broken. I'm sorry for pretending I wasn't. I see you now, and I'll spend the rest of my life staying." She didn't rush to respond. Instead, she let him see her smile over the rim of her cup. And that was enough. Later that week, Cassian scheduled a session. Not for the company, not for Morella, for himself. She didn't know until she walked past his home office and heard him on a call. "I need to unpack some patterns. I don't want to pass on silence." He caught her in the hallway minutes later. "Therapy," he said plainly. "Every Wednesday." She paused, touched his chest gently, nodded. "I'm proud of you." Fatherhood didn't come naturally to him, but it came slowly, softly, like snow melting under sun. He learned how to read Lior's cries, when to wait, when to pick him up, how to change a diaper without panic. He held him with both arms now, not like something fragile, but like someone worth protecting. One morning, Morella woke up to the sound of singing. It wasn't in tune, and it was barely above a whisper, but she followed it to the nursery. And there he was, Cassian Vale, billionaire, CEO, singing off-key lullabies in a soft t-shirt and messy hair, while swaying their son in a blanket. He didn't see her at first. She leaned against the doorway, hands folded. He turned, paused. "You're up." She smiled. "You're singing." He looked sheepish. He seemed to like it. "He loves it," she said softly. He rocked Lior a little longer, then added, "I think I do too." That night, While the house was quiet and Leo finally asleep, Morella sat beside him on the couch. She pulled the old envelope from their anniversary table, the one he never opened. She handed it to him. This was the original. He unfolded it slowly. Read it again, this time aloud. I never needed grand things. I just needed the man who held silence without letting it swallow us. He finished, placed the letter on the coffee table, then looked at her, eyes full. Do you still need that man? She didn't blink. I have him now. He leaned in, kissed her slow, not rushed, not desperate, present. Then he whispered, I'm not going anywhere. She kissed his forehead, held it there, and whispered back, then we're home. Because home wasn't the house. It wasn't the baby monitor. It wasn't the blanket or the schedule or the pictures on the mantle. It was presence. It was honesty. It was him, staying. Cassian stood at the mirror with Leo in his arms. The baby was calm, drowsy after his morning feeding. One tiny hand curled into his father's shirt. Cassian had spent his whole life mastering high-stakes rooms, boardrooms, courtrooms, crisis centers. But this quiet, sleepy boy staring back at him through the mirror made him feel like he was learning life from the beginning. He kissed Leo's forehead, then whispered, You don't have to earn anything. You're already enough. Downstairs, Morella was folding laundry. She heard him pacing gently above, singing again. Not a song anyone would recognize, just a soft tune made up in the moment. He didn't ask her for praise anymore. He didn't need it. Because this version of Cassian wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to be present. And that was the kind of man Morella had always believed was inside him. One afternoon, Cassian brought in a large box. Therapist said I should face the early years. She looked up from where she was bottle prepping. What's in there? He opened the lid. Old journals, letters, my father's voice recordings, financial plans he left when he died. She stood slowly, walked over, sat beside him on the floor. You're ready? He nodded. I want to raise Leo from healing, not habit. They spent that night in silence, reading. He passed her a note his father had written at 16. Win, never cry. Control equals power. If it doesn't serve, cut it. She blinked. You lived by this. He nodded, eyes lowered. Until you... She pressed her hand over his. And now... He looked up. I want to unlearn everything that kept me from showing up. He didn't try to hide how much it hurt. He let her see it. Let her sit with him in the discomfort. Because he finally believed he was safe. Over the next few weeks, Cassian changed more than Morella had ever imagined possible. He scheduled weekly therapy, not just for himself, but for them as a couple. Not because they were broken, but because they were rebuilding from truth. He also changed how he led his company. More delegation, less micromanagement. His assistant now blocked out Leo time in his calendar like a board meeting, and nobody questioned it. Because when Cassian Vale changed, he changed everything around him too. One morning, while holding Leo against his chest, Cassian looked at Morella and said, I want to raise him with more than provision. I want him to know how to love. She didn't respond with words. She kissed his cheek, then placed her hand over Leo's back and whispered, Then teach him by staying. And Cassian did, every day. Not perfectly, but fully. Cassian didn't celebrate wins the same way anymore. There were no toasts, no black-to-tie events, no ego-filled dinners in glass towers. Now, a win looked like waking up before Leo did, making breakfast while Morella stretched on the porch, folding a blanket before she noticed it was needed. One morning, after a long night of bottle feeds and zero sleep, Morella stirred to the smell of warm bread. She padded into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes tired. Cassian looked up. Stay right there, he said. She froze. He disappeared into the pantry, came back with a covered tray. On it, toasted sourdough, soft scrambled eggs, orange slices, a folded note. She blinked at the setup. What's this? He looked at her like it was obvious. It's Wednesday. She raised an eyebrow. And he placed the tray in her hands. 3 months since we almost lost everything. You never got your anniversary dinner. You never asked for a redo. But I needed you to know. Today matters. She stared at him, heart tight. Then unfolded the note. You don't wear a cape. You don't shout. You don't break. But you hold this home together in every way I never knew I needed. Thank you for not giving up on me. On us. She pressed a hand to her chest, then looked up. Are you trying to make me cry before breakfast? He leaned in, kissed her forehead. Only a little. That evening, he asked for 1 hour, just for her. She walked into the living room to find a baby monitor set up, candles lit, and her favorite throw blanket on the couch. Cassian stood beside a warm foot-soak bucket. This is the best I can do on short notice, he said. But I wanted you to be still, for once. She didn't protest. She sat, sank her feet in, let her head fall back. He rubbed her calves slowly. No rush, just gratitude. She spoke softly. Why now? He didn't hesitate. Because I can't raise Lior in love. If I forget to love the woman who made me a father. She looked down at him. You've changed, Cassian. He met her eyes. I came home. They didn't speak for a long while after that. She watched the flicker of candlelight. He dried her feet with care. And the house stayed still, not heavy, not broken, whole. The next morning, Lior let out a high-pitched squeal that echoed through the hall. Cassian reached the crib before Morella even moved. She peeked in from the doorway. You heard that from the kitchen? He turned, scooped Lior up. I hear him even when he's not making a sound. She smiled. Like father, like son. Cassian cradled him, rocked slowly, then said, I think I'm finally learning how to stay, because presence isn't a performance. It's not perfection. It's quiet, consistent, daily, and now it was permanent. Cassian woke first, not to cries, not to an alarm, just to the hush of morning light crawling across their bedroom wall. Lior was still asleep in the bassinet. Morella's breath was even, her face peaceful. He didn't move. He just watched. There were no thoughts of deadlines, no looming travel plans, just the soft realization that he was right where he belonged. He reached for her hand beneath the blanket, traced the edge of her fingers, then whispered, I missed so many mornings like this. Morella stirred. Eyes fluttered open. She smiled. You're still here. I'm not going anywhere. Downstairs, she moved slowly. He poured her tea without asking. She glanced at him over the rim of her mug. You're quieter these days. He nodded. I used to fill silence because I didn't know how to sit in it. And now, I know it's where love breathes. They didn't speak for a while. The clock ticked. The baby stirred, and somewhere between feeding and folding laundry, Cassian turned to her and asked, When was the last time you felt seen? Morella paused, wiped her hands on a towel. I think, before the baby. Before the business swallowed you. He stepped closer, not defensive, not guilty, just open. I want to see you again. That night, he booked a sitter. One of her friends from the clinic. Not a fancy date, not a big plan. Just a fire pit in the backyard, 2 chairs, and him holding a bowl of strawberries like it was the most romantic gesture in the world. She walked out, wrapped in a soft shawl, her hair pulled back. You planned this? He nodded. I didn't want the next memory of us to be trauma. She sat beside him, and for a long time, they just watched the fire. Let it speak, let it heal. Then he turned to her. Morella, he said softly. She faced him. I've apologized. I've changed. But I never asked what it cost you. Her eyes glistened. I felt invisible, she said. And you stayed because I never loved your money or your success. I loved how you looked at me when you forgot who you were supposed to be. He reached over, took her hand, brought it to his lips. Let me keep seeing you that way. She leaned in, kissed him slowly. There were no rushed breaths, no words trying to make up for time lost, only connection, built softly, earned slowly, held tightly. Later she lay her head on his chest and whispered, "This feels new." He wrapped his arm around her. "It is, because this time, their love wasn't about rescue. It was about rebuilding." The next morning, Morella woke to quiet laughter from the nursery. She slipped out of bed and walked slowly to the door. Cassian was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, shirt wrinkled, holding Leor up in the air. "You think you're the boss of me," he whispered to the baby. Leor squealed back, triumphant. Morella leaned on the doorframe, arms folded, smiling. Cassian looked up. "Caught me," he said softly. She stepped in, crouched beside them. "You always wanted a son?" "I didn't know I could want something this much." Later that afternoon, while Leor napped and sunlight bathed the kitchen in gold, Morella sat by the window folding a clean swaddle. Cassian walked in holding a notebook. He placed it in front of her. "What's this?" He sat across from her. "It's everything I've never said out loud." She looked down, flipped to the first page. It wasn't paragraphs. It was small lines. "I didn't know how to stay, but you never made me run. I used to win meetings and lose connection. I've feared becoming my father. I'm learning I don't have to. You're the calm I was born into too late. You're still the most beautiful thing I've ever ruined and rebuilt with." She covered her mouth, swallowed hard. "You wrote all this?" "I couldn't say it yet. But I needed you to know it lives here." He pointed to his chest. She stood, walked to him, sat on his lap like they were 20 again, wrapped her arms around his neck. "I never needed all the words. But this makes me feel like your wife again. Not just Leor's mother." He nodded slowly, held her tighter. "I want you to always feel like the woman I chose, not just the one who stayed." That night, after dinner, he reached into his back pocket, pulled out a small box, not velvet, not dramatic, just simple, like their love. He opened it. Inside, her original wedding band, cleaned, reset, with their son's birth date engraved inside. She blinked, didn't speak, until he said, "You never lost me, but I almost lost the chance to honor what you held together." She let him slide the ring back on. Same finger. New chapter. And later, when they climbed into bed, Morella curled into his chest and whispered, "Promise me something. Anything. No matter how loud life gets. We stay soft with each other." He kissed the top of her head. "I won't let the noise in again, because love in the softest voice is still the loudest thing a heart remembers." 1 year later, the Vermont house stood quiet, touched by late spring. The trees were full again. Leor was walking, clumsily, proudly, dragging a soft plush lion across the floor. Cassian sat on the porch, his coffee untouched. He wasn't thinking about the markets, not about his title, not about his rivals. He was thinking about the letter, the one Morella left him on their last anniversary, the one he didn't read in time. Now it lived in his wallet, faded, worn, folded tight. He read it every Friday. Inside, Morella stood at the kitchen counter, barefoot, spoon in hand. She didn't plan anything dramatic for their anniversary. She didn't have to. Their life was quiet now, rich in presents, full in the ways that mattered. Leor babbled something and clapped his hands. Cassian stepped inside. He said, "Dad, I swear." She smirked. He said, "Dog, Cassian." The neighbor's retriever just walked past the window. He picked up Leor anyway, held him high in the air. "Well, I heard what I wanted to hear." They ate lunch together, all three at the same table. No calls, no clocks, no rushing. Afterward, Morella placed Leor down for his nap, came back to find Cassian at the dining table, holding a sealed envelope. She raised an eyebrow. He stood, walked to her, pressed it into her palm. "Your turn." She opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten note. "1 year ago I almost lost the only thing I ever wanted to come home to, and still you stayed. You held the walls up. You carried the silence. This time, I'm the one holding us steady, and I'm not going anywhere." She folded it, pressed it to her chest. I've waited a long time to hear that from you without pain behind it. He kissed her cheek. This time, it's built on peace. He stepped back, opened the back door. She followed. In the yard, a single picnic blanket was spread beneath the tree. One candle, 2 glasses, a bottle of her favorite sparkling tea. She stared at it. Simple, thoughtful, quiet, perfect. Cassian pulled something from behind his back. A small framed photo, her, him, and Lior, taken weeks earlier on the front porch. The note below read, "This is what home looks like." Her eyes filled, not with grief, not with regret, just stillness, contentment, because they didn't need fireworks, didn't need to announce anything. They were here, together, present. He laid beside her on the blanket, Lior asleep on the monitor nearby. They watched the sky change color, didn't say much. They didn't have to. Somewhere around sunset, Cassian turned to her. "Do you believe in second chances?" She ran a hand down his chest. "I believe in the ones that show up different." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm grateful you never stopped waiting for me to become the man I was supposed to be." She kissed his shoulder. "And I'm glad you finally believed you could." The porch light flicked on as evening settled in. Lior was asleep. The house was quiet. The world, finally, matched the stillness they had fought so hard to earn. Morella sat curled in her favorite chair, a thin blanket around her shoulders. Cassian walked out with 2 mugs, chamomile for her, black tea for him. He handed it to her. No words, just warmth exchanged between palms. She sipped slowly. "You still think about that night?" He nodded. "Every day. Still carry the letter?" He tapped his chest pocket. "Right next to me." She reached out, touched his knee. "I used to wonder if we'd ever sit still like this and feel safe again." He glanced at her, eyes soft. "I think we finally made it." Then, for the first time since that anniversary night, he asked her what he had never dared ask before. "What do you need from me now?" Not back then. Now. She set her cup down, looked at him. "I don't need flowers. I don't need trips. I don't need you to protect me from silence. I need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing." He exhaled. "You want the quiet?" "I want you in it." Cassian stood, walked to the doorway, then turned. "I have something for you." She gave him a look. "If it's a private jet, I'm returning it." He smiled. "No planes." He stepped inside, returned with a small velvet pouch. She opened it carefully. Inside, a delicate chain with a small silver charm. An engraving on it read 6:57 p.m., the exact minute he had yelled, "Save my wife and son." She looked up. "This is..." The moment everything shifted, she nodded slowly. "I thought I was fading when I heard you say that." He sat beside her again. "I was already breaking. But that moment, that was the beginning of me becoming real." She placed the necklace on, touched it lightly, and whispered, "Then I'll wear it. Not to remember the pain, but to honor the man who showed up after it." Cassian leaned in, held her face between his hands, kissed her, gently, slowly, like a vow sealed in silence. They sat there for a long time, watching the night sky, stars blinking through tree branches, no background noise, no outside world, just 2 people, awake in their second chance. Eventually, Morella whispered, "What would you have done if we hadn't made it?" His hand tightened around hers. "I would have built nothing else, because everything that mattered would have been gone." Then she asked, "And now?" He looked at her, softly, clearly. "Now, I build this every day. You, me, him. This is the only empire that can't collapse." Inside, the baby monitor blinked. Lior stirred, then settled again. Cassian stood. "Let me get him." Morella stayed seated, watching him disappear into the warm light of their home. She whispered to herself, "You came back different. You stayed better." And she meant every word, because anniversaries didn't need grand gestures or public declarations. They needed quiet truth, safe presence, and the kind of love that doesn't fade when tested. it deepens. What would you do if the person who once turned away came back and stayed better? If this story touched something in you, if you believe love is presence, not perfection, then take a moment now. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful real love tales. Every view, every comment, every share. It keeps stories like these alive. Stories where love doesn't shout, but shows up. Thank you for watching. And remember, quiet love is still love, the kind that saves.